Hi there. Today we're going to be chatting about low appraisals and what you can do about them, and specifically this moment in time, what I think we're going to see from appraisals in the next 6 months to a year, and how our low inventory is going to impact appraisals. So I'm going to go, as I always do, from real life. I'm going to tell you about an experience I just had. And so after showing many homes to some clients of mine, we found a house to buy on a Sunday night at 8:30 p.m. It popped out on Zillow as a for sale by owner. And I was in Florida, and I called, my clients texted me and said, hey, look at this one that just came on the market. It's for sale by owner. Within 15 to 20 minutes, my fantastic cousin Donna, yay Donna, had run across town and was showing it to my clients for me. They stayed until 10:45 at night, just yucking it up with the sellers and agreeing that they would be the buyers for this house. So fortunately for us, by 11 p.m. Sunday night, the for sale by owner felt confident enough in my assertions that my buyers were going to buy it and my buyers' assertions that they were going to buy it, that he went ahead and made it pending on Zillow. By the next morning, he was already receiving a flood of phone calls of people wanting to see it, people wanting to offer him cash, people wanting to just buy it sight unseen. So it really was an opportunity to snag something immediately as soon as it came on the market. Now, we bought at what the seller, I think, would even agree was current market value, which is currently in this market more than everything has been selling for in the last 6 months. So we have hit, in my mind, the peak, I hope it's the peak, of where home prices and inventory are making it extra tough on buyers right now. So my buyers were willing to pay whatever he was asking, and we did so. And because it was a for sale by owner, we negotiated my commission and put that on top. I discounted my commission a bit to be respectful for the appraised value that was going to be coming in, but we've come up with a low appraisal anyway. Now, in this case, we're doing a VA loan. So this is really a huge concern. VA is very strict about what comparatives can be used. So I was chatting with the appraiser yesterday just to offer any comparatives I might be able to send his way. I certainly was not interfering. I didn't ask any leading questions. He didn't give me any information about the appraisal. I just said, may I provide you some comparatives if I can find them? And he said, sure. You can send them to your lender, and then your lender can send them through the portal to me. Well, I went looking yesterday, and my tip for you is don't just look on the MLS. Instead, go to the CRS tax data tool and go to the prospecting tab. And if you've not used that, we have a video on the YouTube channel showing you how to use prospecting on the CRS tax data tool on the MLS. So I use that so that I could see all past sales in the last year, not just ones that closed on the MLS, but ones that were private sales as well, or just any recordations that had happened in the municipality over the last 12 months, because it's pulling from the GIS system. So that way I was finding any for sale by owners that had sold, any properties that sold privately, maybe neighbor to neighbor or family member to family member. I was able to see literally every closing that took place in the last 12 months. And by using the CRS tax data prospecting tool, I was able to add some filters to that. So I was able to give price ranges. I was able to use the map to be able to look in the area of town that was, closest to my subject property. The depressing part is there were about 4 closings in the last 12 months in that 7-mile radius. So that fit the criteria for my house. And of those 4 properties, mine's in a subdivision on a cul-de-sac. These had 8.99 acres with them, 2.5 acres with them, or were a totally different style home. So I really, really struggled, and I started to see why the appraiser was having difficulty. So what I'm trying to connect the dots for you on here is an additional hardship our low inventory is going to see is going to be the lack of comps. We have had low inventory in active homes. We're going to have low inventory in comps. So just prepare your sellers for that. Prepare your sellers that we might start to see some low appraisals happening, not because there are low comps, that is part of it, but also because there are no comps in some areas. The more rural you get, it's going to be harder and harder to find a property that matches that subject property. And that was my case. We were in Roanoke County. We're in Roanoke County. I will tell you, let me give you another tip or trick for low appraisals. I looked at the pendings on MLS. I found an almost perfect match to our home. Now, appraisers are going to want to bracket. They're going to want one a little better, one a little worse, one with a little more square footage, a little less square footage. However, one of the comps can be what I would call a perfect match. And there was one, and I called the listing agent because it went under contract 4 days ago, and it was listed well above our sale price on my property. And so I just called the listing agent and said, hey, do me a solid. I need your house for a comp. Can you tell me when it's closing and if you think it's going to close for your sale price? And he said, it absolutely is. It's cash. We have a $150,000 appraisal gap language in the contract. So the buyer's willing to come to the table with up to $150,000 in cash to make sure that they still get the house. And it's a cash sale. The appraisal is really just for their own information. And he said, and I can tell you it's going to sell, it's going to close and record way above what you need. So this tells me we're not overpaying for the market. It just has become a challenge to find comparatives in the neighborhood, in the surrounding mile, that are going to justify the price we're paying. Unfortunately, this other house isn't closing until the end of April. We're closing May 2nd. It's not enough time for us to wait. We could have pushed our closing and waited until that one closed and used that as a comparative. We could have done that. We've opted not to do that, and we're renegotiating some of the expenses and some of the price of the house, but we could have done that. So it's always helpful to look and see if there are any pendings that might be closing in the next couple of days. Even if you put a pause on the appraisal for a week to let one down the street close, and then you can tell the appraiser they can use that new fresh comp. This is why we create great rapport between our fellow real estate agents. If I was an agent who doesn't provide feedback, if I was an agent who's a pain to work with, if I were an agent who doesn't return people's calls or always has a full voicemail, I'm not going to find that agents are willing to do me favors like putting the sale price in the day the property closes so that I can use the comp. I'm not going to be able to ask for those little favors that help me out. So this is where good karma goes a long way, because you never know who you're going to have to ask a favor of. So several years ago, we got a low appraisal, but only by about $2,800. Well, the house across the street was was in pending status and was due to close the following week. So we pushed our closing just a few days. And I asked that agent, hey, can you please just mark it sold in the MLS the day it closes? And she was like, sure. They have 10 days to mark it closed. But as a favor to me, she went ahead and put it in as closed that same day. That way we could use that comparative. The appraiser was able to justify the price and we were able to close. So there are some things you can do with low appraisals. I just want to make you aware that we might start to see appraisers struggling to find comparatives, not finding close comparatives, just comparatives in general, lower, higher. You know, they want to bracket it, but we may just struggle to find those. And depending on the loan product they're using, that may not be okay with the mortgage company. They have to follow strict rules when it comes to VHDA, VA, USDA, FHA. And this is where, again, unfortunately, sellers are going to be looking for cash and conventional financing. It was important to me to get this veteran in a home and to be able to let her use her VA loan product. I'm very pleased we were able to do that. It was a long, hard, lot of offers made and getting beat out by conventional and cash offers. So I'm very pleased to get her in this house and let her use her VA eligibility. But now we're struggling with this appraisal situation. So just want to let you know how low inventory is impacting even the appraisers now. Does anybody have any questions, or anybody have any experiences they've had with appraisals coming in low? I forget, the 9 a.m. crowd is my morning quiet crowd. Now we're going to move on and talk about what to do with low appraisals. So this is something that only became a talking point when we got into this market. So 2 years ago, when this sort of feeding frenzy started and sellers were able to demand more for their homes, we started talking about low appraisals, because prior to that, it was really the exception to the rule to have a low appraisal. I remember when I would tell newcomers to the area for a decade, I would tell them, well, I mean, we rarely see things sell for over asking price in Roanoke. I understand that exists in other markets, but that's not really a thing we do here in Roanoke. Well, it sure is now. So because our market historically forever was not a multiple offer market or a selling above asking price market, low appraisals were not really something on our radar. Again, it was something that just occasionally would happen, and it was more of a fluke. And we'd immediately say, who is that appraiser? Are they from out of the area? You know, we were quite spoiled back then. That part of our job was very easy. That is not the case anymore. Now we are having to think about appraisals. We're having to think about our list price. We're having to think about what offer we accept on behalf, like who our seller accepts, because we need to make sure that appraisal value isn't going to be dangerous. So let me share with you some tips and tricks for low appraisals. This was 2 years ago, kind of a radical concept to a lot of our agents. And I think it is still a great conversation to have. And it's important to have it with your clients, with your buyers. Your buyers, that purchase price on the contract, that is the purchase price. Unless there is an appraisal contingency on your purchase agreement, there is no appraisal contingency. So FHA, USDA, VA, VHDA, all of those have to use the standard clauses addendum and use section 1 of the standard clauses addendum, which indicates that there is going to be an appraisal contingency, meaning the home must appraise for at or above the purchase price, or the purchaser does not have to purchase the home, okay? But with conventional loans or private lenders, that is not built into our contract. So unless you are writing in an appraisal contingency, your buyer is expected to purchase the home no matter what the appraisal says. So if that appraisal comes in $100,000 below purchase price, your buyer is obligated to show up to closing with $100,000 of extra cash to be able to close on that home. I look to the clause right between additional financing terms and cash contract. There is a line there, I believe it's 11E. It states that the buyer will come to closing with money order, cashier's check, or wire fund at closing for their settlement needs. That means even an appraisal gap, unless you write in appraisal language. And the reason why this is because the seller did not say, I'm selling my house for appraised value. The seller said, I'm selling for that purchase price. How you get there, buyer, is entirely up to you. But I have agreed to sell your house at this price, sell my house at this price, regardless of what the appraisal says. If I'm the seller, I'm saying it's not my fault you have to borrow money. It's not my fault you don't have the money to come to closing. I'm telling you, I'll sell my house to you for this price. You need to show up with the money to close. And if they don't show up with the money to close, I do believe the buyer could be in default because of that clause stating that they'll have the funds to settle. We've got a quick question from Stevie. She says, on the other hand, with government loans, if they are offering way over, it would be good to negotiate what will happen if the appraisal is low too. Absolutely. And she's saying this may be your next point, Ashley. Yes, the appraisal may come in low and we need to be prepared for that. It may mean, and it's not rocket science here to understand, that is why sellers are not taking a chance on government-backed loans right now, because they don't have to, number one, and because there is that danger unless the buyer has written in that they have extra cash to bring to cover some sort of appraisal shortfall, some sort of appraisal gap. Unless that buyer is indicating that they have extra cash, then the seller doesn't have to take a chance on them. Does that answer your question, Stevie? And I'll give you some idea of what I'll give you some idea of what that looks like and how a buyer can still purchase the home if the appraisal comes in low. So if I'm the seller, again, I'm saying, no, I didn't say I'd sell it to you for XYZ unless the appraisal comes in low. I said I would sell it to you for XYZ. Please show up to closing and bring your funds, and I will let you have my house. So a low appraisal has absolutely no bearing on the value of the house. The seller is selling at market value, not appraised value, not even what market value was 3 weeks ago. They're selling at current market value. And that is important for the buyers to know, because I do feel like there is still some thought that sellers can't sell for more than the appraised value. They sure can. This market has absolutely illustrated that. There are people willing to bring extra cash to closing in order to purchase the home because they are buying above appraised value. And Stevie says, not a question really, just experience. Had buyer offer and accepted 185 this summer with FHA, and it appraised at 158, and the seller reduced the price. Now, prior to 2 years ago, I think that was very common. I think sellers thought sometimes, well, if they can't come to closing, I don't want to look for another buyer. I'll just reduce the price. Appraised value is all I'm going to get. Well, this market has re-educated everyone that that's not necessarily the case. They may very well find someone who's willing to pay more than appraised value. And that has been happening, at least for the last year. We've been seeing a lot of language about appraisal short gaps. Yes, Stevie, if the seller's desperate, or this is happening 5 days prior to closing and the appraisal comes in and it's low and the seller is just, they've already moved, they don't want to look for another buyer. But currently, Jennifer and Donna and I are seeing a lot of contracts with language about appraisal shortfalls, appraisal gaps, about what the buyer's willing to bring to the table if the appraisal comes in low. I have seen lenders waiving the appraisal contingency. These are lenders saying it is no longer required to have it appraised because the buyer is bringing such a large down payment. So if the house is listed for $300,000, it sells for $350,000, but the buyer is bringing $175,000 as a down payment, an appraisal may not be required by the lender. The lender may waive the appraisal contingency because the equity that the buyer is going to have when they close on that house is so large and the loan amount is so small comparatively that the lender feels comfortable releasing that appraisal contingency. There is some algorithm there they use. I don't know what that algorithm is, but just know that we're seeing all of that right now because sellers are able to sell at current market value because of the uneven nature of how many buyers there are versus how many properties there are available. So when you have a buyer, especially a first-time home buyer, or a buyer, and I'm going to call anybody who hasn't bought a house in 15 years a first-time home buyer, they don't know what this market is doing right now unless they've done research on their own. So it's important to help them understand because a lot of times they're going to have a parent with them who's saying, oh, well, when the appraisal comes in low, then you'll get it for that price. No, not necessarily. And we've seen some very upset buyers and or buyers' family members who just can't understand why the seller is requiring their buyer to purchase over appraised value. And it is difficult to help them understand because that's what the contract says. The contract says they're buying it for XYZ price. It does not say they're buying it for appraised value. There is no line on there saying, checking the box saying, I'll buy at appraised value. That does not exist because no seller would ever agree to that. Who knows what sort of appraisal is going to come in? Yes, Jennifer, please.
Can you just go over one more time about not having an appraisal contingency in your contract and thinking that when the appraisal comes in low, that's when you'll renegotiate? Because I still have agents using that as a strategy to get their offers won. And I don't think they understand that little blurb saying that they're going to bring in the money. Yeah. Can you just go over that one more time?
Of course, because Jennifer has dealt with that multiple times with some of our agents where either our agent is the listing agent or the buyer's agent. We've seen it happen both ways. So it's going to be important as a listing agent to ask the question. So we have had listings here at our firm and the listing agent accepts a contract. They obviously advise their seller to pick the highest and best offer. And so that offer currently is going to be above listing price. And they're buying the one that is the highest price, but with the best terms. And what we've seen is 3 weeks in, the appraisal comes back and the appraisal comes back low. And the buyer's agent is saying, well, we need the seller to lower the price now. And then the agent calls me and says, do I have to lower the price now? And I say, is there an appraisal contingency in there? And they say, they didn't write anything in. And then I say, no, you do not have to. Your seller agreed to sell the house at XYZ price. And I may be saying this wrong, but 11E, that clause says the buyer will show up with proceeds to close, period. And we have had several irate buyer's agents who think we're trapping their buyer, forcing their buyer, and have argued with us as to whether their buyer is even in default or not. And, you know, it doesn't help matters because the buyer can't get their loan. So the buyer's in default, but the buyer can't get the loan and the buyer can't close. So, you know, we're kind of at a stalemate there. So what I've been advising listing agents to do is when you see a contract come through like that, and the financing terms are not fully filled out, I want to see loan amount because it tells me how much down payment money they have. I want to see the terms of their loan. 5 years ago, we just check a box for fixed rate and leave the whole thing blank. That was very, very common. I don't want to see that anymore. I want to see, and it's the listing agent's obligation to their seller to make sure that is all filled out. I want to see the whole clause filled out. I want to know the financing terms of this buyer, because if we have a low appraisal, I need to know that they're bringing enough down payment that they can cover any sort of appraisal shortfall or appraisal gap that may come up. And I have no problems about calling that buyer's agent and saying, hey, we're going over the offers. Have a question for you. Have you had a conversation with your buyer about what might happen if the appraisal comes in low? Now, 5 years ago, listing agents would never say such a thing because that might be suggesting we had overpriced our home, okay? And listing agents would never, ever hint that possibly the appraisal would come in low because we had to put up this front that, oh no, our list price is perfect. That is exactly what market value is. That's exactly what appraised value is. I'm no newbie. I know how to price my properties. Now we're saying, okay, talk to us about what your buyer's going to do when there is inevitably an issue on the appraisal because of low inventory for comps, because we're creating new home sale records every month in sale prices. So because of that, every house that sells is potentially setting the new standard for the neighborhood. So anytime you have that, where are the appraisers going to get the comps? So while we're continuing to climb on this escalator to new values, we're going to struggle with appraisals. So I have no problem as a listing agent calling that buyer's agent and saying, talk to me about what your buyer is prepared to do if the appraisal comes in low. And if you're not getting satisfactory answers on their end, that may be the highest, but it may not be the best offer. I may recommend to my seller when I'm the listing agent that they take a lower net proceed offer that has more down payment, more room to cover an appraisal gap than maybe a higher offer where my seller may end up having to renegotiate. So really, you are accepting highest and best is the tricky bit. Calculating the seller's net on the offers is the easy part. That's easy to say they're offering this and these are the concessions they're asking the seller to make. That's the easy part. It's the best part. Closing date, ability to cover an appraisal gap, inspections, repairs, all of that is the part that is the best part of the highest and best offer. And that's where our value as the listing agent really comes out. It is our job to interpret all of those offers and figure out what is going to be the best fit for our seller. Thank you, Jennifer. Excellent point. And yes, I'll admit, even some of our buyer's agents were trying to pull those shenanigans back before we had a chance to educate them, where they'd say, okay, well, let's just go high. And when the appraisal comes in and it comes in low, then we'll have an opportunity to renegotiate. Not necessarily. Why? Why should the seller have to renegotiate?
And what I hear is, well, they won't be able to get their loan. They're going to have to renegotiate.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's not the case. And that then puts your client in default, correct?
Yes, absolutely. I believe that. And if you have put in to be strong a $5,000 earnest money or $2,500 earnest money, you're going to have some serious explaining to do to your buyer about why they are having to chance their earnest money deposit because you did not fully explain to them their obligations on the contract. We have several transactions that I'm working on right now where attorneys' letters are now involved because both sides believe that that the other side is in default. And it's stemming from some of these issues where we're saying, I'm so sorry you can't buy at the price you told us you'd pay, but that is what you told our seller you would buy it for. There is no appraisal language. That financing section does not say unless it doesn't appraise. That's why the standard clauses addendum exists for the government loans. And that's also why my own appraisal language exists in the broker clauses on zip forms so that you can access that. And you can put that into the additional financing terms of the purchase agreement if you're doing a cash contract or a conventional contract. Now, most of the time, cash contracts, they don't care about appraised value. They understand they're buying for market value. They understand they're buying at what it is worth to them right then. But that's what the conventional loans are doing too. I know this is some confusing stuff. Anybody have any questions or examples of when they've stubbed their toe on this?
No, but you did bring up earnest monies, and whoa, let me tell you, earnest monies have changed this year. We are getting big earnest monies on these contracts. So just keep that in mind if you are trying to get a house and not getting it. We're seeing $5, $10, $15, $20, $25,000 earnest monies. It's crazy.
Not at the lake, y'all. Here in Roanoke.
Here in Roanoke. Yeah.
Yep. And sometimes they're using that as their ability to show that they can cover an appraisal gap because they've already got a $10,000 earnest money deposit. So that's cash already at hand on reserve. We are seeing that. Do I think that's a good idea for your buyer? Don't know. But I can tell you when the earnest money is that big, I am doubly, triply, quadruply making sure my buyers understand their obligations to buy a home and how we're not going to flake out. And what's making it all so uncomfortable right now is because they are having to pull the trigger on a house so quickly that there is a lot of buyer remorse going around. I have seen such an uptick in agents reaching out to me post-closing and saying, hey, I know what the answer probably is, but the hot water heater doesn't work and the furnace is making a loud rattly noise and it's only cooling, but not very well. And my seller closed last month. Is there anything we can make the seller do? No, I know it's awful. You would have to prove fraud. And if you wrote an offer where you're saying that either you're not going to have inspections or inspections are for your information only and you don't have a termination right, buying houses as is scary. It should be scary. So that's just how it is. Yes, Jess.
So when we bought our house back in 2010, 12 years ago today, actually, we bought our house for $150,000, and like a week later we had moved everything in after we had closed and everything, and our well went dry. So it was a lady that was living by herself, and so when they did the inspection, everything was fine and ran as is. So when a family of 5 was doing laundry every other 5 minutes from the move, it was the well ran dry, and like, it is a stressful time. And so we had the well people came and they were like, well, we can either hydrofract it for $3,500 or we can build a new well for $12,000. And we were like, oh my gosh, we've got to pray about this because that's a lot of money.
Did you frack it?
So we fracked it, and we haven't had any happening since then, but
Good.
it was, I mean, it's really crazy. And it's like,
Yes.
what do you do in those situations?
Well, and it's complicated because in the state of Virginia, we are a buyer beware state, which means the seller's disclosure obligations are tiny. In the state of Virginia, real estate agents have more of a disclosure obligation than the seller themselves. So the sellers have just a few items, and those are indicated on the summary of obligations form. But listing agents and buyer's agents are held to the Realtor Code of Ethics, which requires us to, and also it's in the statute as well, we're required to make disclosure of any material facts we know about the property to any potential buyer, which is way higher of a standard than a seller. In other states, sellers have disclosure obligations, not in Virginia, which is a buyer beware state. Now, a seller really is going to have a hard time explaining if they prevent inspections. And I think we're going to get into some quagmire here coming up when sellers are counter offering saying, well, get rid of all of your inspections and I'll let you have the house. And if you're preventing a buyer from doing their due diligence like that, there might be a toehold there for an attorney to get in there and say, well, our buyer was prevented the opportunity to do their due diligence. That's probably coming down the road. The more and more buyers who move into houses, they feel like they overpaid and they feel like they were in a rush, and now they feel like they own a house that has problems. I think if it is a case where the seller counter offered and said no inspections, there may be some issues for that seller. Now, our buyer's going to go to the expense and the time of taking them to court? Maybe, maybe not. But if I were representing a seller, I probably would not recommend them counter offering to remove all of the inspections or to prevent the buyer from doing inspections. I don't know that that's a best business practice for a seller to try to say later, oh, no, I didn't know that the well was going to go dry. And yes, I also said they couldn't do a well inspection. That's probably not going to look great if that ends up in front of a judge. So just another minefield for us to navigate during this period of time.
And let's just face it, things happen. And, you know, the seller may not have known. That was my personal house. My tiny little cottage that was built in 1935 they could not find any septic records for it as far as the septic tank was concerned. So we're assuming it was a 2-bedroom septic. And when my little family moved in that had tons of laundry and showers and potties and this and that and another, I learned very quickly that my family couldn't handle a 2-bedroom septic. So we had to change the way we did things, high efficiency dishwashers and washers and things like that to make it work for us. But it worked great for that family because it was just a mom and a kid. So sometimes they just don't know. Sometimes it's just ready for that water heater to go out.
That's right. And don't forget that exactly what you're saying is why some things do conk out right after closing, because a new family, a new person, they are using the house in a different way. Maybe that thermostat had always been set at 68 and now somebody wants it at 74 all the time. Like my dad wants that house sweating all the time. Okay. So he's going to have that thermostat on like 75. Well, if the previous owner had always kept it on 68, that's obviously going to stress the system in a way that it hasn't been stressed. And that may be just enough to have it go out on somebody. Now, of course, you know what the buyer's going to think. Oh, they were just limping this along to get it across the closing. You know, it may be, it may not be. We don't know. And optics are everything. You know, I sold a house and we were told, and the listing agent put it down as public sewer. It was not. It was a septic system. And when my client family moved in, the septic backed up. It had been a little old lady who was living in a nursing home who had that house. Now, when they opened up the septic system and they found somewhat recent repairs, it was hard to convince me and my buyers that that family who'd owned the house for 30 years didn't know that they had a septic system. Someone ordered the repairs. Someone had to meet somebody out there to pay them for making a septic repair. So it's hard for me to believe that that seller did not know they had a septic system. But we would have had to have taken them to court, proven that they knew. It's a difficult thing to prove. Okay. I'm going to wrap it up about low appraisals and our market, unless anybody has any questions. Okay. If you have questions, just call me. I want to take a moment to remind you of Affiliates Night coming up. I'm going to pull the date real quick. And Affiliates Night, Donna, if you feel so inclined, would you tell them what a good time you had at the last Affiliates Night we had a couple of years ago? That was, I believe, your first one.
That was my first one. And of course, I'm not a big, huge party type person, but I had a blast. They had tables set up, little games you could do. I think it was Ashley, Jennifer, maybe Kara was there. And I know that Lori McCary, there was a whole lot of Wainwright agents that were there, and we had a blast playing games and having fun. They had delicious food. They had, you could have drinks or you could choose not to. And just, I just, I don't drink. So they have something for everybody. And then they gave prizes at the end. They had raffles and things like that. And it was a fun time, a lot of laughs. It was really fun. If you haven't been before, or you're new to it, go. Like I said, it's something for everybody. I had a great time.
I will tell you, they even had a photo booth. I still have this picture with me. So they had a photo booth. There's Stevie and Lori and Walter and me in the photo booth cutting up. So, and Stevie's right. Heavy appetizers as advertised means lots of food. You do not need to eat dinner before you come. And there is so much pent up excitement about getting back to Affiliates Night. So Affiliates Night is an opportunity for you to meet the local businesses who have decided to invest in RVAR. They have decided to invest in us and our business. So they are all sponsors of RVAR. They are why we can have $10 classes at RVAR, because oftentimes they are underwriting whatever guest speaker is coming. So they are underwriting a lot of our events. They are sponsoring those events. And this is an opportunity for you to go out and thank them for being supporters of our business. So we would not have nearly as nice of events if we did not have those affiliate sponsors. So anytime you bump into one of our affiliate sponsors, and there are always at RVAR a huge list of them hanging on banners in the training room, it is great to just say, hey, thanks so much for your participation with RVAR. It's obviously a lot of businesses that are intrinsically tied to real estate, lenders, insurance agents, banks, and this is their event. The affiliates group at RVAR throws this event every year, and there's always a theme, and the affiliates go gangbusters to make sure it is a really fun time for everybody. And if I remember correctly, 2 years ago, Yetis were the hot giveaway item. So like every third affiliate booth had some sort of Yeti product they were giving away, like whole coolers.
Did not
and
win.
things.
I did
didn't
not win the
win
first
either.
thing. Donna did.
I
Donna
want a
won.
picture. I
Yes.
want a huge picture, gorgeous scenery. Yeah, you just put your name in the raffle. They also have little games you can play and win little prizes. One of them had an umbrella that I am still using today. So it's just a fun time. It's fun.
It's a fun time.
Meeting
Chris
like
won the Yeti cooler.
did you?
Oh, Chris Tower, I'm jealous.
I'm jealous. Yes.
So take a big stack of business cards, because
Yes.
that's how they get your information to send you information and stuff like that too. So
That's
be sure to
right.
have your business cards with you.
And the theme this year is going to be game night, like board game night. So the affiliates will all be dressed up. They've had movie night in the past, which was so fun. They were all dressed up like movie stars. This one is going to be game night, so like board game themed. So their booths will all be themed that way. It is Tuesday, April 19th. There will be a lot of Wainwright agents there. So it's also just a great opportunity to go out and hang out with your Wainwright agents,
We have fun and laugh, and I mean,
yes.
it's a way to relax and have fun outside the office atmosphere.
And I will tell you, Kara asked me if you could bring a date. You can bring a date as long as you buy them a ticket. So Jess, you can be my date. If you want to come to affiliates night and win lots of prizes and meet lots of real estate agents, you come on. So as long as you buy them a ticket, you can bring a date. Okay. All right, gang, I'm going to go. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.